What's up, fellow gamers? Phreak here, and the mood struck me to do this one on time. Twisted Fate and his related cards got released as of time of recording about an hour ago, so I'm like, hey, you know what? We're already here, we're at home, let's go ahead and record a quick video on part 3 of the set reveal. And it's Twisted Fate and the supporting cards. You can see the text, or at least the names of them, all right over there. I guess it's that way. So regardless, Twisted Fate is a 4-mana 2/2 with quick attack, and when you play him, he gets to play an extra effect. If he can stay in play, he levels up when you have drawn 8 cards when he's there. Okay, so what are the cards? Well, the cards are Gold Card. And it's worth noting that because of how his level 2 works, none of these are targeted. They are all auto-target, right? It just automatically goes to the strongest enemy, deals 2 and stuns to it, which is actually a pretty good effect. Now again, stunning the strongest enemy tends to be better than stunning the weakest one, so it's whoever has the highest power. And then if there's ties, highest toughness. So it's probably not going to kill something. I mean, it theoretically can, I suppose, but it's not likely to. But, you know, it'll stun a level 2 Elise, or it'll stun, you know, something half decent. It'll, you know, a Wraith Caller or something. Not terrible, but it just kind of buys you time. And I want to point out, right, like, if they open attack against you and you know, go to stun something, nothing happens. Nothing meaningful. You do damage to a minion, then you know, no one cares. But, I mean, it's still decent, especially if you get to play this on 4 and then get rid of a unit. They'll respond to some kind of 4-drop, but you might kill their 3-drop with this, so this is actually pretty decent. This is a, you know, poorly targeted Mystic Shot at slow speed, but not horrible. Or at least it removes something from a potential blocker, so that can work with aggro. Red card, deal 1 to all enemies as well as the enemy nexus, so you've got more plunder synergy. Now, I want to point out that you only really get red card, at least for level 1, if you play Twisted Fate. And he costs 4 mana, so you're playing a 4-drop. If you're playing on 4, you literally can't play another minion. Otherwise, you are hoping that you can. I don't think right now what I can think of is any spells that trigger off plunder. There might be, and I'm forgetting, but even though this does give you plunder, you would have to play TF on like 7 or 8 to get any reasonable minion out of this. So, not the best plunder synergy, but it is. I think it's Gangplank synergy. It's a lot of Swain synergy because you can hit up to 7 things with this. So anyone who has a level condition like Sejuani is going to care at least a little bit. It is another round you hit the Nexus. That's not bad. This is something that you can play on 4. And then attack on 5 is another effect. So TF can help fill the gaps there. Without having you to like waste a card on 0 mana hit next or something. So I think that's actually half decent. So some plunder synergy there. Well, there's level synergy, not as much plunder synergy. And then blue card is just simply refill 1 spell mana, draw 1. Okay, so these are all pretty decent. I think gold card is generically the weakest, but still solid. If your opponent really is afraid of you playing this on 4, you know, if they develop on 4 and you can drop TF, that's going to be really good for you. That can be really, really solid. If your defense on 4, this is pretty nice. If your offense on 4, realistically stunning their 3-drop and then letting them answer with a 4-drop is probably not a winning play. I think you're almost better served attacking, seeing how the combat goes, and then whatever they do at the end of, when they want to summon, then you consider red carding their random stuff or gold carding whatever they summoned or whatever else. This can kill high, power Heimer turrets and stuff, but so can red card, don't get me wrong. I think a lot of the game states don't really favor gold card. Now, one thing I do want to bring up, though, is red card is really favored by Gangplank barrels. Because if you have like a 3-stack powder keg, this is 4 to all enemies, including the Nexus. And just realistically, there are not that many effects like this, right? There's Piltover has Chempunk Shredder, which is a 5-mana 5/2 to deal 1 to all enemies, but not the Nexus. So, one also way to think about this is TF is a cheaper Chempunk Shredder. And realistically, Chempunk Shredder is almost a good card, but almost just costs too much. It comes on too late. You've already started to lose. If TF only ever came down as Chempunk Shredder, I would argue that TF, who's only ever giving you a red card, is oftentimes a better card than Kempmunk Shredder, and Kempmunk Shredder is bad, but this is, like, red card is, I think, generically pretty good. It's going to find a lot of use. Blue card, obviously, also generically quite good. It kind of makes him a 3-mana 2/2 / draw a card with some kind of, text on him. I mean, this is fine, right? This makes him vaguely Shadow Assassin, 3-mana 2/2 draw card with text, but I don't know. Like my mind immediately goes to like, hey, red card is really nice, and blue card's fine. Again, it lets you cycle TF. Also, it hard synergizes with TF because it draws a card, and drawing a card is TF's level up condition. So yeah, I mean, how is he as a 4-mana 2/2 that plays a card? I think he's fine. I think he's actually totally serviceable. He is a 4-mana. He's a 4-mana 2/2 that plays something decent. Yeah, 4-mana 2/2 is garbage, but he always does something half decent. If it's blue card, he's a late 3-mana 2/2 draw card, which is, I mean, to be fair, Shadow Assassin is arguably the best card in Legends of Runeterra. That's certainly up for debate, but it's up there. So, I mean, if you're remotely close to Shadow Assassin, now Shadow Assassin is good because of Elusive, not because 3-mana 2/2 draw card, don't get me wrong, but like, if you're remotely anywhere near Shadow Assassin in card quality, you're an amazing card. I'm probably going to put this to like 6. I don't want to go to 7 because I don't think it's that good, but yeah, I mean, you know what? I'm going to go 7. I'm going to go 7 only because I think red and blue card are both good in a lot of situations, and you're going to get value out of this. I think it's actually realistic to say that. So, yeah, is a 2/2 quick attack amazing? Not really, but when you red card, everyone goes down by 1 health. Now things with 3 health can't block it. So, like, if Draven attacks on 3, you play TF on 4. Now Draven can't block TF, and it's something. One other thing I want to point out, actually, this is actually helping with gold card synergy a lot. Is Bilgewater has things like Parlay. Right? Not only are we talking about Gangplank with powder kegs, but dealing 2 damage to a unit with gold card and then parlaying it for 1 is pretty effective. Same with having 3 or 4 powder kegs and your gold card dealing 5 damage. It's going to actually remove Ash or Vladimir or whatever. I'm going to make the guess that having ways of triggering powder kegs constantly. And now that I see TF here, for example, I kind of want to go back, and I had the earlier card where it was like a 2-mana 2/2 that just created a powder keg. I'm like, oh, that seems really bad. But imagine you do 2/2 powder keg into, I have the threat of Twisted Fate, so you have to waste one of your attacks challenging my kegs. It's like, well, now it's 2-mana 2/2 heal for 3, which is quite good. That's like actually somewhat reasonable. It's arguably better than Kindly Tavern Keeper, which is like a 4-mana 2/3 or something. It's like, oh, okay, and now we're in a world where, yeah, it turns out just I have so many units, and I think that's where it's going to kind of go, right, is Bilgewater and probably Shadow Isles is probably the most likely combo, not just for like Maokai Nautilus, an entirely different combo we're using Gangplank TF, where you're playing spell effect heavy and you're saying, look, I'm going to make powder kegs constantly, and you're going to have to pull your hair out deciding to get rid of powder kegs every other round. And by the way, once your attack is done, I can spam powder kegs onto the board, then do it on my round as well, and then at the end of the round, throw a big Wrath of God down, and then, if you actually go for an attack the round afterwards and you've already got 3 powder kegs, I just Withering Wail you and blow out your entire board. So having more cards that can just come down and say, hey, by the way, I've done spell damage, congratulations. I don't know if 9 is correct. It's actually not that big of a blowout. It's just a combo piece. Yeah, like I don't want to go 8. I don't want to go 8 because I don't think it's good enough. But we're just gonna go 7s across the board. I mean, I think it's very fitting for a gambler to be 777. But there's obvious synergy value. Here's the thing, I don't want to go 8 on a combo level. But I'm not sure I shouldn't go 8. Maybe I should. Maybe it's this. Maybe it really is this. I can really see this being good. I don't know. I really do think the vanilla card, I would slot this into almost any deck and it would be fine. Yeah, it's not exactly like amazing for Zoo necessarily, but it'll do some things. It can come down late on like round 8 or whatever, and it just stuns the enemy Tryndamere and you get to go face. So like I think it really does work in a lot of contexts. So yeah, I think this card is actually always good. I would run it in almost any single deck. The problem is, of course, it's a champion. It takes up a champion slot. which I am not really counting in this. I think it's almost too aqueous of a concept of like, but it costs a champion slot. So it's like, let's just not go there. Let's just not go there. Okay, so good card. Next up, we have level 2 Twist of Fate, which is, of course, a 4-mana 3/3 quick attack, which is objectively stronger. So we're going to start with 7, but hold on. So now instead of when you play this card, play a Destiny, it's the first 3 other cards you play a Destiny card. So like theoretically, if you just drop TF on 4 with an empty hand, this is an objectively weaker card. I would argue that 3/3 no Battlecry is worse than 2/2 with a Battlecry. Or I guess a play effect. So, there is a world where this is an objectively weaker card than level 1 TF. I don't think it's realistic, but there are situations, especially in top deck wars, where it is actually a weaker card. But regardless, what actually happens is you play 3 cards. I believe they go in order, by the way. So you play a card, blue card comes out, it draws. So what's nice is if you only have one other card in hand, you play this other card, it then triggers blue card. You have another card to play to then trigger red card. And that's what's really, really nice. There's also going to be weird things around sequencing where if you let them resolve, you kind of want red card to resolve before gold card resolves, because you want red card to have a chance at killing a 7/1 and then gold card hitting something else. Also, again, with things like powder kegs, right? You would like your red card to have the big AoE damage and then gold card something afterwards. So there is some level of like, when you're playing your second card, your opponent's probably going to try to nuke TF and to force you to jam gold card out, but you would like to spread these out. In general, I think this is quite strong. Keep in mind, these are fast effects. They work in combat. So let's say you're playing with Demacia and, you manage to play some other things, whatever, and, your opponent plays a barrier card and you're like, haha, red card's coming out to knock all your barriers off mid-combat. So there's things like that, right, where by this card existing, you are hard threatening certain effects happening. What's nice is, in general, your opponent cannot kill your cards at burst speed. Bilgewater is increasingly throwing a lot of very cheap burst spells out, and a lot of them have card draw. I still think Bilgewater goes really well with Piltover and Zon because you have things like Rummage to just churn through cards. I mean, Rummage in and of itself draws 2, which is 1/4 of his level up condition. It's 1 mana to draw 2 cards. Which then lets you find more things to play. Like it in and of itself is a card you have played and thus triggered TF. I mean, if you Rummage with TF on board, that is 2 card draws. It's 3 card draws instantly. Level 2 TF because you get the 2 for Rummage and you get the 1 from the blue card. It's also refunded itself mana cost wise, and you've got at least these 2 other cards to play. So there's definitely some stuff going on that can be really, really good. In general, TF seems to want you to draw a lot of cards. Now, I want to point out that some of the Fizz synergy cards from earlier, I believe they create random spells in hand. They are not drawing cards, so there are some other parts of Bilgewater that are not directly synergized, but can still be good. But is TF level 2 good? I think it's fine. I actually don't really want to go any higher. I mean, I should. Here's the weird thing, right? Like, I feel like level 2 TF is objectively stronger than level 1 TF. Like, if this was a card and it said, hey, I'm a 4-mana 3/3 that creates a crap ton of value every single round by just dumping your hand, that would be an absurd card. So, like, this has to be an 8, right? I don't think it goes any higher combo-wise because realistically, like, playing up to 3 cards a round is just something that happens. So I don't really think this changes really in any way. This doesn't have absurd powder keg synergy because you're not like getting any more. If you're trying to powder keg with a red card, that's still going to happen. Your red cards are slightly less predictable because if your cards in hand are slow, and it's like, well, I have 2 6-drops. It's like, well, you can never play both of them and get to red card. So like you must, by nature of this card existing, have a lot of moderate cost things to play. That is just a fact. That is just going to have to happen. I can also see Piltover Zon being further synergistic because of things like what's the 2/3 that looks vaguely like Jinx. But that's another good one, right? The one that buffs all of your spell and skill damage by 1. I know roughly none of the card names in this game, despite playing thousands of games of it. So yeah, there's a lot of synergies here. I like, it's funny because even though there are direct synergies and anything that does 1 damage AoE, you really want to ask like, hey, are there ways to increase this by more? And yes, there are. I just have a hard time wanting to put it any higher. So I don't know. It feels kind of weird because I know this card does have synergies, but I'm kind of sticking to my numbers right here. Maybe it's weird. I don't know if Tief really should be an 8, a 7 to an 8, but I don't know. I could see it. He's not going to level up very easily outside of a specialized deck. And by virtue of the fact that you've had to draw 8 cards, they're hopefully really cheap. And that way you can play them constantly to make this TF good. I can see TF being great. The one problem is TF is very, very easy to kill. You cannot reliably draw 8 cards instantly. It's going to take several rounds, and it's got 2 health. Maybe you run Ionia for defenses. Maybe you run Demacia for defenses. I don't know if you can really play a deck where you're just jamming defensive spell cards down to keep TF alive to create the card draw value engine. Maybe it's possible. Now we go into pick a card. Pick a card is Twisted Fate's champion card, and it is 3-cost burst. Shuffle a card from hand into your deck, and then at next round start, draw 3 fleeting. I don't believe it's draw 3, comma, they are fleeting next round start. I believe it's you draw 3 that are fleeting at the next round start. So what's nice about this is it allows the 3 cards you draw to let you refill all of your mana. It lets you start the next round by drawing 4, which means if you, right, like if you can play TF and he lives and you play pick a card, I should actually be using page up because it's like almost the right amount. He instantly sees you draw 4 cards. 1 from the start of round, 3 more from pick a card. That is very, very good. One other thing that is nice here is it lets you take a card from your hand and shove it into your deck. Now, this is useful because there are lots of ways now to draw fleeting cards that are not playable. That is a very, very big deal. That, you know, if you draw a card and you've got 4 mana and it's Vi and you really want to play Vi, but she's fleeting, you can pick a card and jam Vi out so that you don't have to lose the card. Because keep in mind, right, if you pick a card that was unplayable now, because it's a 10 drop and it's only round 4, or the card itself was fleeting, you're not really dropping a card from your hand, because that card was gone anyway. That card was gone anyway. So now it's 3 mana, draw 3. If a card was unplayable, and I mean, to be honest, in a lot of cases, the cards we have in our hand realistically are unplayable because we got Tryndamere early on in the game and we don't want him yet, or whatever, or it's just, you know, this is not a matchup where I need my 4th deny or something. Who knows? We're playing Karma and she generated Dawn and Dusk, and sorry, this is just a case where I don't need it anymore, or whatever. Like, there's a million reasons why a card can be dead. This, yeah, you're going to draw it again later at some point, but you're not going to draw it in the next 3 rounds probably. So this card is deceptively amazing. Now, it draws 3 fleeting cards at next round start. Those fleeting cards could indeed be bad. You could pick a card, one of those, back into your deck again, of course, but it means it's 1 round later, you got to bank some mana, maybe it's okay. So the more I kind of think through how this card works, the more I quite like it. It is 3 mana for +1 hand size. And it's only +1 hand size if you can use them all. But again, keep in mind that we are assuming by using pick a card here that we are getting rid of a card that we weren't going to play anyway. So our hand essentially didn't have that card regardless. That is useful, right? It costs you this card and it costs you the card you don't want to play, and it gives you 3 as a replacement. It's kind of like Rummage in that regard, right? Although Rummage is technically go down a card. This is go up a card, but does very similar things to Rummage otherwise. The downside being you must be able to play those cards next, but yeah, I'm down for this. I think this is really, really good. This is good in the late game scenario because, again, it is card hand size up, and it's decent early game as well, realistically. I think this can fit both an aggro archetype as well as a more mid-rangey game plan. I wouldn't really play this in control necessarily because I think you want to hold on to cards in your hand. And I mean, essentially, if you play this card and you can't play any of the 3, you just burn pick a card and whatever you dunked for nothing because those 3 cards just go away anyway. Right, at worst, this is discard 2, or it's play me discard 1 is the worst case scenario. The best case scenario is play me draw 3. I don't know. Maybe it should be a 5 in average case more, just because I guess I should really be valuing the fact that those cards might not all be playable, might not all be useful. But again, it is draw conditions, which is nice, and you might find stuff you care about. Okay, so I think this is decent. I think this is a fine way to put it. It's a 5. Is it a 5 vanilla or is it a 4 vanilla? I'm like going down and down over time because of the fact that you can't necessarily use those fleeting cards. We're going 4 vanilla. I think realistically you're going to be in a lot of situations where the cards you draw aren't actually playable. I think it's actually realistic that the cards you draw aren't playable. I mean, you play this on 4, and you better hope you don't draw a 6-mana creature, or it's literally useless. You have to pick a card, one of those back, and you still discard the rest. Yeah, it's not great. Okay, so we're gonna stick with it being a 4 generic as a combo piece. I think it's at least a 7. Again, the fact that you can throw back fleeting cards from your hand, you can throw back things that you don't care about, right? Like think about some of the Ionia stuff that you were playing, that you could have played, that created there was like, create a fleeting resonating strike in hand. You can toss that down to your deck, and yeah, you might draw it at some point, but who cares? As long as you're putting cards that you care about in your hand now, we're good. This lets you throw out Heimer turrets that you don't want because your board is full. It again lets you fix draw quality if you're like, well, I drew this random crappy 1-drop, and yeah, I'm gonna draw it eventually later on down the line in my deck, but that's okay. It's also a way to get deep faster, a little bit. You're obviously putting a card back in, but you're still getting 2 closer to deep, which is solid. So yeah, I kind of like this for hand fixing. I think it's a solid 7 as a combo card. I think it's a solid card overall. Yeah, the more I think about it, again, the more I think it's probably not a good card generically, but I think it's an okay card overall. Okay, so what's next? What's next is here's gold, red, and blue card. All right, so we get 2 mana 2/2, which is okay-ish. It's like a 4. 2 mana 2/2 I think is okay to be a 4. Black Market Merchant. When you draw an enemy card, reduces cost by 1. So if there are ways to draw enemy cards, you are great. Plunder, draw 1 from the enemy deck. I am taking this to be draw 1, aka draw from the top. Anytime you draw a card, and it just says draw a card, it is draw the top card of your deck. This technically shouldn't be any different. I mean, there is a chance it is draw a random card for the enemy deck, but I'm guessing it's not going to be. So Plunder, take their top deck. Again, this doesn't have any special synergy or anti-synergy with Deep, because Deep kills the bottom cards from the deck, so it's not really reliable that the top card is good. I'm stealing this from Swim because I watched his video. Things like Ash and Draven's biggest fan put cards specifically on the top of the deck. If you are against a Yeti deck, Yetis get thrown towards the top of the deck, so there's ways to do that. You can grab a Yeti and it costs 0, which is, cool. This needs to be in play when you draw an enemy card, by the way. So if there's a way, by the way, to have like 3 Black Market Merchants, the third one that you play with Plunder, it pulls the card up and the card is -3 cost. Is that super realistic? Not terribly. I want to point out that like and this is a reaction to the top comment in my most recent video. Thank you for chiming in. I read the comments and thank you for the discussion. I am not sure how to value Plunder, because realistically I don't know how reliable it is in a generic deck. Like, we might really be in a world where every deck that ever splashes Bilgewater is running Plunder synergy to some degree. That just too many Bilgewater cards have Plunder synergy, and thus anytime you would ever be in this region or this faction, you're gonna have Plunder triggering sometimes. Maybe so, right? In this case, it's 2 mana 2/2 draw a card. And that card is -1 cost, which is like absolutely incredible, right? It's okay, fine. It's more like a 7. I mean, Avaros and Sentry is an amazing card, right? Avaros and Sentry is like a 7 or an 8, because it's just, I think it's that good, personally. And this is, if the conditions are met, Avaros and Sentry. It is arguably a slightly weaker Avaros and Sentry. I think you would rather draw from your deck than from theirs, because the more you draw from your own deck, the more consistent you are. Also, in general, the cards in your deck better fit your game plan than the cards in your opponent's deck. This should make sense, right? Imagine drawing, I don't know, Crawling Sensation, and you're like, I mean, that's nice, but where's my Elise synergy at, dog? Right? Like, the cards are objectively better in your opponent's hand than in your hand, and your cards are better in your hand than your opponent's cards are in your hand. So the fact that they're cheaper by 1 helps, but I am still not sure that I would rather have a random opponent card at -1 cost than one of my cards. Like, is this effect, even if it's always reduced by cost 1, and I think on average it probably will be, I don't think you're likely to have, I mean, you can sometimes have 2 of these, and you draw Tryndamere, and then Tryndamere costs 6, and you win the game. Like, that can happen, right? There's a 1 in 100 games where you get a 6-cost Tryndamere and you win the game off of it. That is going to happen. There's going to be a clip on Reddit. It's going to be great. I will upvote that. I will laugh. It'll be wonderful. I'm happy that will exist. But in general, I would say a random card from your deck is better than a random card from your opponent's deck at -1 cost. This is slightly weaker than 2/2 draw card, even when it happens. Now, is Plunder reasonably common? Sure, right? This is probably a fine card. Right, it's a 2-mana 2/2 that sometimes draws a card. I don't want to say 6. I don't want to say 6. Maybe I should. Plunder will happen sometimes, right? This card will draw a card, even if you're not building with synergy, this card will draw a card sometimes. I guess it's a 6. That's fine. If you're reliably drawing a card, it's a 7. I think that's fair. I think that's fair. Plunder will happen sometimes. Next up, we get Brash Gambler. To play me, discard 2. Well, once again, we are in a situation where Bilgewater is increasingly getting a ton of card draw, and they are intentionally not planning on playing all of them, right? So, if we scroll back up, I should stop using the scroll wheel, pick a card, increases your hand size by 1, and I feel like kind of winks at you and expects you to not play them all. So this could well be 3 mana, your hand size is flat, right? It's 3 mana, some other effect. It's 3 mana, Give Twisted Fate 3 experience. 3 mana, save your Vi for later. And in those cases, it's not a great card. Again, I rated this before, even with some of the card draw working. Whoops. But in those cases where the cards are dead, and you're like, well, these are going to get discarded anyway, Brash Gambler lets you discard 2 of them. I can really see a world where Bilgewater is doing this sort of Piltover Zon Noxus thing, where they're just swimming in cards that they're constantly getting in and out of their hand over and over again. Draven's, of course, a good example of this. Jinx is a good example of this. This, levels up Jinx super duper fast. And it says, yeah, you know what? I just discard 2 cards. And sometimes it's because I just drew a million of them, right? Because I drew too many cards, they're all fleeting, can't play them all. Ione has a synergy as well. Ione generates cards in your hand that aren't necessarily that good, but you'll play them anyway. Fizz creates random 1-mana spells in hand that you don't really care about. Fizz's teammates, the cards you play in a Fizz deck, put random 1-mana spells in your hand that you probably don't really want. There's a lot of that kind of stuff. Again, Heimerdinger is another example of someone who's just going to like I can see Heimer Fizz, we're going to jam a million 1-mana spells, we're going to throw a million tokens into our hand, and we're going to use, Fizz or Lee Sin, 2 of all 3 champions, whatever. We're using Brash Gambler. We're just, swimming in random cards that we don't really care about, but we're just sort of cycling through tokens constantly. We'll play a Crocolith, sacrifice some 1/1 turrets, and Brash Gambler just discards 2 turrets from hand and comes down. This sort of absurd card churn can be really, really good. Also worth noting is that absurd card churn in and of itself is kind of a win condition, right? Now, keep in mind, to be very clear, this is how Nautilus and Maokai are different, right? Maokai needs units to die or cards to be tossed. Nautilus wants your deck to be empty. Those are not always the same thing. Brash Gambler does not in any way help Maokai, but really, really helps Nautilus. Now, I'm going to assume Brash Gambler can always at least hit once. I think hard losing a 4/5 around round 4 or 5 is very unlikely. So I expect Brash Gambler to live to attack at least once, which means Brash Gambler allows you to go card neutral. Once again, you're in a state where the cards you draw might not be ones you want, but sometimes the cards you discard might not be ones you want. But if we're taking her as a generic card that, just might not be good, it's a generic card, discard 2 of the ones I draw are fleeting, it's maybe this. Actually, I'm gonna stick with a 5 here, because even though the discard cost is rough, and I don't know if you can play her on an empty hand, by the way, I think much like Crocolith, you can't just play it as a blank 4-drop. You have to have had cards in hand to discard. Is this good in a, Jinx aggro deck that wants all the discard synergies? Maybe. I'm not sure. I'm not sure this is better than running Draven stuff, but maybe we're there. But regardless, when I attack draw 2 fleeting, this card likely lives to attack twice. It'll almost certainly live through its first attack, and then as long as you're not really defending with it on round 5, you can attack again on 6. And actually, here's the weird thing: is that you probably do not want to play this on 4 and then attack with it on 4, unless your hand is unless your deck is full of 1-mana spells. Or a ton of ways to cheat your mana pool back up. You cannot realistically play this on 4 and then play the cards you drew by attacking. Which means you're playing this on 4, you're attacking on 5, and you're attacking again on 7. Attacking with this on 7 is not very threatening as a card, but it's allowed you to draw 4 cards. If you play this on the end of 4 and you attack at the beginning of 5, you are going to get a lot of value. And it will trigger this on the beginning of the attack, which means you will draw spells that, like, you might get a back-to-back or whatever. You might get some burst speed spells that you can play during this combat and get use out of them. That can work really, really well. Additionally, there's always a chance that you have a second Brash Gambler. It draws you 2 cards. You're like, well, I don't want to play them. I'm just going to discard them with my other Brash Gambler. It's okay. No harm, no foul. And that's where I think it's going to come down to, is that I think there's going to be a deck archetype here where you're not really playing card quality or card quantity the way that we normally think of it. That you're just like, yep, I'm just going to churn through stuff, and as long as I have enough options, we're good. The other thing to point out, and we'll look at it with the next card as well, is we saw there were a few, I think they were Ionian cards, that specifically cost 2 mana on rounds they were drawn. Right? I think there was a spell that went down to 2 mana, and there was a unit that went down to 2 mana on the round that they were drawn. Which means, Brash Gambler open attacking on 5 probably lets you play through those cards, because the more cards you're drawing, just like rapidly, the more likely you're going to see those cards and play them for cheap. And that is a great way to get some absurd value out of it, of like, well, I need to play them this round anyway, and they're cheap this round anyway, so let's just jettison that out of my hand. That is going to be really, really good. The more of those kinds of cards exist, and unless I'm misremembering, there's only like 2 or 3 of these cards, but that can still be like a 10th of your deck, which is not horrible. Yeah, I mean, that's going to happen fairly reliably, is you're going to draw these fleeting cards that cost really, really little, and you get not only value, but also tempo out of this. So I'm going to say, there's a really good situation where this can be a 7. There's also probably ways to cheat this card out of your hand. None that I can think of, like, okay, War Mother's Call brings it out. Realistically, War Mother's Call is not that bad here. This is a pretty decent card to drag out and swing with, so you can start drawing your spells, which is solid. The cards you draw are fleeting, so again, if you draw a second or third copy of a champion, it becomes a champion spell. You can just jam that spell out and get it out of the way, and then kind of throw it back in your deck, not fleeting the next time around. But I like this card a fair bit. I think this card's actually pretty decent. I think I'm just going to still keep it as a number 5 overall. But I think this card can be, I know, like, generically I'm putting all of my combo cards as 7. I mean, if we scroll up, a lot of these are 7s. There's a lot of 7s here, but I mean, realistically, that's the way it is, right? These cards aren't cards that win you the game, but they fit the synergy. Yeah. And again, even if the cards do nothing, it's 2 XP on Twisted Fate. And actually, PZ also has, or is it Ionia? I think it's PZ. There's like Astute Academic that gets buffed as you draw cards as well. Like, that's also decent, right? That's more draw synergy. And then we have Pool Shark. Good old Pool Shark. So it's a 1-mana 1/2. When I am summoned, draw 1 fleeting next round. Now, I want to point out that draw 1 fleeting is not a problem, right? So this is okay. It's a 1-mana 1/2 that has a draw condition. This is at least a 6. Okay, this is not a great stat line. Don't get me wrong. But look, if you low roll and it's a bad card, whatever. Like, you give away a little bit of information to say, hey, by the way, I pulled up a Draven and I couldn't play it, so I have 1 less Draven in my deck. Okay, you don't have to play around Draven so much anymore. But, right, this is the region that has all these cards that I think it's Ionia, All these cards, maybe it's not. Who cares? It doesn't matter. I'm sure the comments will tell me what they are, and I'm just blanking. But there is a deck that loves to play cards that cost 2 on the round they are drawn. Guess what round comes after round 1? Round 2. You have 2 mana to play the 2 mana card that you just drew. That is good, right? So the upside here is great. And what's actually even good about this as well is it's a 1-drop that you actually are okay playing just like on round 9. Like, you know what? This is not a game where I need this card. That's okay. I'm just going to cycle it. That's fine. It's a way to cycle through your deck. Like, this has deep synergy, right? This is a reasonably playable card in a Nautilus deck where you're just like, okay, I want to refill my hand now. Let's jam this down. Yeah, it's 1 mana, replace me next round. It's not a great card, but it fits a lot of different decks, right? This fits a lot of different decks. I think it's a 7 overall, realistically. Like, I think it's funny that a 5/7 is a 5 and a 6/7 is a 7, just because, like, how approachable is the combo realistically? I don't know, whatever. It's arbitrary. Let's be real here. But end of the day, yeah, I think this card is like there's value in this being a 1-drop that is actually not garbage on round 10. That's a pretty rare thing. It's gonna work in a lot of different decks. Again, it has the sort of miracle synergy. Miracle would be the magic keyword where it costs cheaper the turn you draw it. Some of those cards are worth playing outside of Miracle, so just take an extra turn. Whew, that was a card. But yeah, I mean, this is. I think it's a decent card. I think TF has a lot of draw synergy. The problem is TF is going to die really frequently. He is a 4-mana 2/2. That card is going to constantly die. But this is going to fit your Fizz type decks. It's going to fit really any deck that just wants you to play a million cheap spells. This fits a Karina deck as well, right? I can see Karina Fizz being a deck, right? Where you have this like early game aggro sequence that turns into Karina. Like, I don't know, right? I'm just like spitballing on random stuff, but yeah, this stuff can realistically work. I'm kind of glad they revealed these towards the end. These are the more difficult cards to understand and appreciate, and a lot of these aren't good without knowing the other cards that exist. But the fact that there's cards that you want to see them on round 2 and they're really cheap when it happens is very, very good. Ionia has the 2-mana 3/2 that goes out of your hand for free if you play 2 cards. I mean, this is a region all about just churning through cheap cards, playing and churning through cheap cards. Those synergies exist here, right? This can be very, very good. Red card is a huge powder keg synergy, but yeah, we're seeing the pieces come together, and we're seeing the decks kind of formulate in our minds. I think these are cool cards. I really do like TF. I think TF is tough. I really can see a world where TF's actually a 4, and it's like, actually, sorry, he never levels up, and turns out a 4-mana Kemp Shredder is not a good card after all. I don't think that's true, but we'll see. Cool to see. I think these are exciting cards, and I will probably see you tomorrow morning for whatever the rest of the reveals are. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.